British Home Secretary James Cleverly travelled to Italy on the day the British government's infamous plan to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda was passed in the House of Commons. And Cleverly compared London with its Stop the Boats policy to the Italian government, which played a key role in the EU ending search and rescue operations in the Mediterranean with the abolition of Operation Sophia in 2019. Rome would be leading the way in criminalizing civilian search and rescue operations by charging the crews of rescue ships like the Juventa with colliding with human traffickers when they save lives at sea. In the autumn, this alliance was underlined by a joint article by the British and Italian heads of government, Rishi Sunak and Giorgia Meloni, in The Times. In it, both committed themselves to taking joint action against immigration to Europe. The Conservative Party's rapprochement with the European far right is not new. In 2009, under David Cameron, it left the main right-wing bloc in the EU Parliament, the European People's Party, and joined forces with more extreme nationalist forces to form the European Conservatives and Reformists bloc. This includes fascist parties such as the Sweden Democrats, the Latvian National Alliance, and the Bulgarian National Movement. Liberal opinion in Britain associates right-wing nationalism with Brexit, but Cameron was a supporter of remaining in the EU. And as the Tories' current association with Meloni shows, the Conservatives continue to play a role in promoting far-right and anti-immigrant policies in continental Europe. The British electoral system makes it extremely difficult for small parties to make a breakthrough. Political movements from the left and right, which elsewhere in Europe pushed new or formerly marginal parties such as Green Syriza or La France Insoumise on the left, and Spain's Vox or the AfD on the right in Germany to the fore, and have found themselves in Britain within the two major parties in Westminster. A socialist resurgence in the Labour Party from 2015 was expressed through the leadership of Jeremy Corbyn. The main political home of extreme anti-immigrant nationalism is the Conservative Party. However, this does not mean that the role of the insurgent right-wing forces is irrelevant. The largest today is Reform UK. It emerged from the Brexit Party, or the United Kingdom Independence Party, UKIP in the end, and Reform UK, which regularly polls at 12 to 13%, is threatening to capture part of the Conservative vote in the general election, with former Tory MP Lee Anderson, for example. The party combines anti-immigrant policies with racism against established non-white communities. And incidentally, Anderson left the Tories after being suspended for claiming that the solidarity marches for Palestine showed how London had been taken over by Islamists. Few believe that Reform UK will become a major parliamentary force. The danger lies solely in its leader's close ties to the Conservative leadership and the Tories' visible efforts to compete with them for racist votes. Labour, for its part, views the rise of Reform UK with complacency, saying the most likely electoral impact is a shrinking Conservative vote. But serious socialists must pay attention to the Reform UK and the part they're playing in emboldening the hard right wing of the Conservative Party, which is already rebelling under a weak Prime Minister and is very likely to take the lead if the Tories lose the next election. And meanwhile, the hard right is feeding on the fears caused by Britain's failing economic model in order to win votes for anti-system policies. And living standards are falling and real wages have been shrinking for 15 years, that's true. And the share of wages in the national product has been, or the GDP has been declining for more than 40 years, while the share of profits and returns has increased. And they say this is a direct consequence of especially of the politics since the government of Margaret Thatcher. The deterioration of public services is now evident in crumbling schools, a public health system with a waiting list of over 7 million treatments, a collapsing transport and postal networks, and the collapse of local authority services through mass closures of libraries, swimming pools, etc. And that, of course, gives Labour quite a swing here. Brexit was sold to the public as a means of taking back control, which it would have been if it had been carried out by a left-wing government, for example, by reversing privatization of the policies of the last 40 years, I would not see any difference of the consequences here. I just want to say that. I'm not so sure, as some are pointing out, that if Labour were in government, Brexit would have been much better. No, Brexit is the problem, not the government. Even if the Brexiteers say their government it's the government's fault because they didn't implement Brexit properly. No, even this chaotic government of the last years prevented some of the worst that could have happened about Brexit. But all this talk about the Convention of Human Rights and talking about refugees and everything is something that is kind of the international project of the far right that we have. Together with other European states, they are working to destroy the rules established after the defeat of fascism and the founding of the United Nations in order to create a new and better world to develop that left the area of international conflict. But now the ultra-right is still working of bringing that all up. And the ultra-right Tories are not just tearing up the rules on refugees. They are working to create a new normal in their own country. The government has passed a whole series of authoritarian laws to increase rampant police violence and restrict process, like the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Act, or the National Security Act, or the Public Order Act. And it has tried to pass effective ones to ban strikes. And the bankruptcy of public services is intended both to pave the way for further lowering citizens' expectations of government at a time when they cannot provide the living standards with their politics. But much of the project is shared by all political parties. Labour wants to maintain recent authoritarian police laws and refuses to consider the investment needed to bring public services back up to speed. And since this guarantees that living standards will continue to decline, they will definitely look for some other forms of getting a way out of this. Definitely the socialist way of Jeremy Corbyn he brought into the Labour Party would not be the way to bring Britain out of this. The only thing that could do this was some, how do you say this? Some center politics with a conscience, and the whole thing with the extreme left and the extreme right never works. Neither side. And if the far left in Labour would have still been there, we would have the same chaos as with the far right ruling the Tories. But they really have to find a way to get rid of these far right extremism, but they will not, because it starts with the people, and we see it here in Germany as well with the AfD. We have a number of AfD voters, and we will see big results for them in Eastern Germany in the autumn when the elections are there. But we have to find a way to make people understand what they're doing there by voting for parties like that. Resentment and finding scapegoats in foreigners or whatever you're choosing. We here in Germany know how that worked in the 1930s. And the ones of us who do think never want to have that again and don't want to have that anywhere. And so we have a long way ahead of us to get rid of extremism, and unfortunately it's on the rise at the moment. But the Tories are really in trouble if they run after the right-wing policies, and it's the same here in Germany with my party. You cannot copy the extreme right-wing. The only thing you do if you do that is advertising for the original. It will never help you. And if you want to know more, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.